एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद। एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद। एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद। एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद। एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद। Thank you. It gives me a lot of satisfaction that we have a person like Satish Jacob with us and the Pancholi here, who have been a pioneer and been fighting for a cause for the last over 35 years. And it will be good to hear to them also, subject to our availability to the time factor. We are gathered here to observe 35th year of this attack on the Gold Temple and other 37 Gurudwaras, known as Operation Blue Star, in June 1984. On this day, we refresh our memories of the Himalayan blunder committed by the government of India at that time, resulting in attack by the Indian Army on this one of the most spiritual place of the Sikhs, where universal message is being sent out for the humanity, for peace and brotherhood. This calculated attack by the state forces for their vested interest was basically meant to break the community, revenge on the community for all the action they have taken to uphold the justice which they wanted for India during emergency and later subsequently, as well as to teach a lesson to the community for being straightforward and coming forward for fighting for the others. Coming to the recent happening, there is a revival of the nationalism in this country with the massive mandate which has not come through. The nationalism has come to play a big role. Not that it's a new thing here. It's happening in North America. White is white and others are not equal. It's happening in China, it's happening in Russia, so it's happening in India too. India, which has gone through a period of long slavery, has now come of age where the nationalism is being talked about, and rightly so, because they never had the freedom available to them for more than 2,000 years. So this is a trying time for the minorities, especially the Sikhs and others, where they have to be careful in their things and have to fight for their cause wherever they are, what capacity they are. Just give you a little background. The word Hindutva was created or coined by V.D. Savarkar in 1923, wherein the concept of nationalism was brought out, and this has subsequently been pioneered by the RSS and the right-wing forces to take it forward in one way or the other. Punjab happens to be the main focal point today because of the minority, and some other places too, where this Hindutva is going to play a very vital role. We know about the Nazis and the Jews. They have defined their own nationalism, and that's what the white, as I mentioned to you, white is white and black is black. They can't be together. Unfortunately, Punjab had the first witness such scene in 1978, the time when the Shiv Sena took a birth in Punjab and Trishul Sena was available or was on the road in response to the procession which were taken out by the community during the Gurudwaras or during the Vaisakhi festivals. So it was the problem of the whole thing started way back in 78 onwards, and it's still going on till today. So this is all a political game which is being played. Polarized, the vote bank politics has come to play in a big way today. And we are victim of that. Whether it's a minority, the Sikhs or the Muslims or anybody else, they are all victim of that the polarizing of the vote. That is how the majority has been gone to one party today in India. So, keeping all this in view, I think we will have to be mentally prepared, ready ourselves for all the eventualities which are likely to be faced. It's a big challenge for all, and especially for the minority in the Sikhs. And let's hope that things go well with the new wave of thinking coming in the Sikh intelligentsia, with the academic field, and because unfortunately we have no leader worth his name or assault. We are rudderless, and there's no leader. There's a big vacuum in the community today, and we only hope and pray that we have a good leader come in who can take care of this community and take it forward in his own way. Thank you very much. Rest of the history, you all know about it. I would now take it forward and introduce you our panelists one by one. Hanji? Hanji, haan. So I request Sardar Satnam Singh, kindly come in. Then you have the Jaswant Kaur. You have the Hartosh Bal, and there are Harmandar Kaur. And the our President, Sardar Pushpinder Singh. Talking about the panelists, we are lucky to have a person like Satnam Singh. He is a barrister in law and advocate from UK. He has relocated himself in Delhi, fighting for the cases of those who disappeared in Punjab for the last 35 years. And they've been able to locate more than 8,700 persons. This is basically in succession to what has been done earlier on by Jaswant Singh Khalda, who had listed about 25,000 people which were missing, and they have been recorded, but he was eliminated. So we are thankful to him that he has been taken on the job, and he is here with us today. Give him a big hand, and let's go. He's been fighting the human rights cases in the Europe also, and with his background of the law, he has been very successful. And this is the mission what he's taken is basically labor of love. Jaswant Kaur is LLB, is human rights activist and documentary filmmaker. His wife of Satnam Singh is a husband-wife couple, and they have been able to do a wonderful job in Punjab for doing the same job of trying to find out the disappearance of the people concerned. I'm not going more than that in that. She has been doing a wonderful job on the human rights activity side, and we welcome her to this. Hartosh Bal, I'm sure you all know about him. He is a very popular media face. He is a political editor of the Caravan magazine and has earlier worked with publications such as Open magazine, Mal and Tehlka, and rest. He is basically engineer from BITS Pilani, but taken to the journalism and the writing in a big way. Give him a big hand. We have Harmandar Sahib, another accredited journalist of about 35 years experience, and she's been able to cover the Punjab politics for the last more than 35 years. She has been responsible for covering even the Akali movement. She's been able to cover a fairly big amount of Punjab politics, meeting all the Punjab politicians, including Sant Pindas Velwa, a number of times, and had the video and the audio recording placed with her. And she is the author of a couple of books like The Forts, then the Anandpur Sahib, and then the Blue Star book on 84, which is in fourth edition today, going with full details. Well-researched book, but there may be some difference of opinion here and there. That is immaterial, but the material available is of a very high quality. We'll welcome Harmandar Sahib. So I would now request, not taking much of time, to Satnam Singh to start the proceeding, and let's see we can do it.
The Sikh Forum has been holding now, as I understand, for many, many years to mark the 35th anniversary of Operation Blue Star. The other thing I wanted to thank you for is when Jaswant and I first came to India and we came to Delhi, kuch lokan na vichar assi kite sige that what is the sort of thinking of the people, not just the Sikhs, but people that have lived in Punjab, and they've suffered so much for the last 35 years. And a few people told us that if you go to Punjab, you'll have a different opinion. And ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸ਼ਹਿਰੀ ਲੋਕ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ view ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ. And then when we researched, we read a few articles on how the people that had lived in the cities perhaps had a different perspective on these terrible events that took place, and the people that were affected from the villages maybe had a different perspective. And the one thing that I wanted to share with you is that we were told that the people in Delhi, khas karke the Sikhs, they've moved on. And if you're trying to sort of gauge the pulse of what had happened to people, then tusi utthe inna time na lao in terms of speaking to the Sikhs there. And mainu badi khushi hundi hai that actually you're marking this event in Delhi on the 35th anniversary, and you have such a brilliant turnout of Sikhs. It shows that the issue still matters, and it's still a very important issue for the Sikhs of Delhi as much as the Sikhs of Punjab. And the second thing that I wanted to share with you is that we prepared this documentary that it's had a few viewings, and we're looking to put it out to the rest of Punjab particularly, and the rest of India if possible. Was that I wanted to share another example, that we went to a Gurudwaras in West Delhi. And the Pradhan of the Gurudwara, just before the showing, had said, take a few minutes and announce the documentary. And again, the kind of view was maybe people are interested, maybe they're not. We spoke on the stage for a few minutes, and we showed this small clipping. And as we were about to leave the Gurudwara Sahib, and I was putting my shoes on, an elderly gentleman came up to me and said, this is a really important issue, and we're glad that the issue is being raised. And from his top right-hand pocket, he showed me a very old newspaper article. And the newspaper article was of the dead body of a person who'd been killed in the 1984 massacres, and the very emotive picture, I'm sure many of you have seen it, of the dogs eating the body. And he said, if you don't have this, please keep this for your research. And for me, the touching thing was, it wasn't pre-announced that we were going to be there discussing this documentary or this work. This old man happened to have this thing tucked away in his pocket. And for me, what did that message send to me? That these people that have suffered, they carry and live with this pain every single moment of their lives. Every single day, those who've lost family members, those who've been killed, those who've been disappeared. It's a pain that's completely undescribable. When someone is picked up or they're killed, or let's just say amongst our immediate family, if there's, God forbid, a big incident, somebody's killed in a car accident, especially if it's a young person, the death of a young person hits you like nothing else. And when people come and do afsoos and they share the pain of what's happened, the extended family members, even people that normally wouldn't go to a funeral would turn up to say, "Bahut zyada dhakka hoya is parivar de naal." You know, chaddi jawani vich is ladke di maut ho gayi, ta bahut hi sanu dukh laga that why did this happen? And it's something that we can all identify with, and I'm sure we've all been to some condolence where something has happened prematurely. Now, I want you just to imagine for a moment, for 1 second, that when somebody dies, it's a big grief. And the only way that family can get through the grief is when they look at that dead body, when that dead body is taken for cremation, when the Akantwat Bhog happens, and you have all of the ceremonies and the rituals that follow, and it gives that kind of, some kind of sukun to that family, that the departed soul has that final Antam Ardas, and the soul then travels to where it should then go on to its onward journey. The one thing for thousands of these people of Punjab is that they were not only denied the existence or the last moment to see their loved one, they live in this perpetual na jiondeyan ch na mardeyan ch. Because thousands of these people, and I'm not exaggerating, these are thousands of people from the districts of Amritsar, Taran, Faridkot, Firozpur, Patiala, every single district of Punjab has recorded these cases where at 5 o'clock in the morning, the police and the security forces would enter the house, they would pick somebody up, they would arbitrarily take them, the family members would be abused, and then they would be taken to a police station, and in the police station they would be kept and tortured for a number of days. And the struggle of that family starts from that point. The family goes to the Sarpanch, they go to the Panchayat members, and at that stage, when we're talking about the early 1990s in Punjab, nobody would be willing to stand with these family members, saying, "Tuhade munde nu ta chuk liya, tuhade naal assi khadange ta sanu vi chak ke andar kar denage." So the first struggle of this family is to gather as many people as they can, to go in such sufficient numbers, and they would go to the police station, and if they were lucky, they may find out that that person is still alive, in a brutalized state, he's tortured, he hasn't eaten for a few days. And then what would happen would be that there would be this frenetic activity, so then this next phase of that desperate attempt, knowing that he's alive, maybe if the police officer wants to take some money off us, some money is given. Maybe if we go and do a shabarish to a senior politician or a senior police officer. And then this family would be in this kind of complete maze for the next days, weeks, months. Ultimately, the activity would stop. And then one day when they would go to the police station, they would be told, Mata, jehda tusi hun karde firde hain to bhul jo. And with a shake of a hand, they would be told that it's not worth, jehda tuhada munda, he's no longer here. The scenario that I've described to you are the lucky ones. Lucky in the sense that ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ state ਵੱਲੋਂ ਜਾਂ police ਵੱਲੋਂ they've been given some indication that that person is dead. They would read in the newspapers, and 3 or 4 days later, that there was some encounter that happened in some far-flung village in the border districts of Amritsar, and the person had been killed in a fake encounter. The family would never be told about what happened to the dead body. The dead body would be cremated as unclaimed and identified. And this is what the Jaswant Singh Khalda work was. He went into cremation grounds, and in just 3 cremation grounds in Amritsar, 3 in one Jilla of Amritsar, he uncovered 2,500 illegal cremations where the Punjab police were killing people and then illegally cremating their body. But there's a huge number of victims that we discovered. They were abducted, The police never acknowledged what happened to them, and they're completely missing people. Those families today are still struggling because as far as the state is concerned, they're missing people. Na jundiyanch, na maryanch. They can't get a death certificate. So when you understand the psyche in Punjab, when some family member passes away and there's a dispute over land, they can't get the death certificate to get the succession. The widow of the person can't get a pension. The children who are entitled to some subsidy or relief to say that you would get a quota because you're an orphan, you've been denied. Those people until today have not been recognized as victims. And some of the work that we're trying to do and in forums like this is to say that you have not recognized these people as victims. That any time there's any discussion on what's happened in Punjab, it's never a reasonable, rational, clinical discussion of what has happened in Punjab. People would say, "Eh ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ, ਪਰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਊਗਾ." You know, maybe it will revive something, maybe it will create some kind of uncertainty in all this. And what's happened to these victims is they've been completely pushed to the side, completely, right to the margins. So that when, after things had calmed down in Punjab, normalcy had returned, and the government had announced a rehabilitation package, so that victims of terrorist violence were given subsidies, they were given next of kin were given jobs, there was a complete package and quota. These people who have suffered were completely excluded from that package. It took the National Human Rights Commission and the Supreme Court of India 18 years to identify 1,527 victims of Kalara's 2097 list. And ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਉਮੀਦ ਰੱਖੀ ਗਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਹਨੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਗੱਲ ਲਿਆਂਦੀ ਆ that this has actually happened, a person who only fought with a pen and the truth, who kept within the bounds of the law, never asked anybody to take up arms or do anything illegal. It took 18 years to recognize those victims, and the Supreme Court completely let down the victims by saying that we're not going to order criminal inquiries into those 1,527, but we're going to give a very small amount of compensation, सवा लाख देता, किसी ਨੂੰ 1 ਲੱਖ देता, ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਉਸ ਬੇਸਿਸ ਤੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ, the ਲਾਸ਼ ਦੀ ਘਰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਲਾਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ, ਲਾਸ਼ ਦੀ ਬੇਅਦਬੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ. So the wider question for the court was, ਚਲੋ ਲਾਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ, ਅਰਦਾਸ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਅਖੰਡ ਪਾਠ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਕਰਦੇ, ਉਹ ਆਪੇ ਸੰਸਕਾਰ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ, fine, we admit that it's a human rights violation, but what was the bigger human rights violation? How did the dead body become a dead body in the first place? And these are the things that the Supreme Court, first of all, narrowed the investigation to these 3 districts, and it didn't ask the wider question, how did the dead bodies become dead bodies in the first place? And the only thing that was ever asked in this 20 years of litigation is if what has been presented as evidence is false, then you show us where it's false and fabricated, and you dismiss it as a judicial procedure should. If ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਿਓ these are fabricated, concocted things, dismiss the case. But you can't deny thousands of people of their fundamental rights under the Constitution, their basic human rights, which was that they had a right to live, and when their lives were arbitrarily extinguished, then the state should recompense and order criminal inquiries. The topic today is disappearances and drugs, and it's actually a very interesting topic of conversation, and I'll just quickly, it's a big issue, the disappearances in Punjab, but I'm just going to mention why it's so relevant. Is amongst the Kalara cases, the CBI only investigated of 1,500 identified bodies, 22 cases. Those cases have been stayed for the last 25 or 26 years by the accused lawyers filing various applications and the court successively entertaining those applications. And the one thing that comes out from those cases that we've studied very carefully, that not a single police officer was ever interviewed under interrogation conditions by the CBI. They were never arrested. And in fact, they were never put under any disciplinary inquiry. And those police officers had gone through their entire lives with promotions and benefits and everything else. And while these families have suffered and struggled to get to court to give evidence against them, these police officers very, very, very comfortably retired. And these are the questions that need to be asked about how did that happen. And the second thing that happened after militancy in Punjab, there was a complete vacuum of what do you do where these police officers who were incentivized to kill and to get rewards and out-of-turn promotions, what was their incentivization and what happened after that? And this is where you find this phenomena of unbridled, unchecked police power. Then it's like water, isn't it? That when the water needs to find one route, if you put a stop to that route, the water will find another way. And it's no coincidence from the mid-90s, the early 2000s onwards. It's very much talked about Shashi Kant, retired police officers. There's a number of police officers that talk about the nexus between the drugs and what happened post-militancy. And the thing is, if you don't give the people justice, if you don't look at institutions and say the people that committed these crimes were never brought to account, then you are the authors then of your own misfortunes, because you've given the people that there are to protect our lives, the people that are there to uphold the law, the people that are there to enforce the law, you gave them a clean blank check to say, pick up these 22, 23, 19-year-old boys, kill them and then get the rewards. I was talking to somebody and I said, the worst possible crime that can be committed is the act of murder. And we all watch these television serials where they say, this person was a serial killer because he's committed these heinous crimes. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these serial killers that are freely roaming in Punjab. That haven't just killed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 20, 100 victims. And the question I ask myself is, how does an individual live with this? You've taken young boys, and we can have all sorts of debates about what drove militancy in Punjab, what were the causes, who was responsible, what was the state response. But if you look at the demographic of all these cases that we've seen, there was one case that we followed in the CBI court in Patiala, and the police had maintained a story, it was a fake encounter, and they said he had an AK-47 and he was pumping rounds. And the first thing that the judge said, he picked up the picture of this boy who was 15 years old, and the judge's remark during the cross-examination was, "ਇਹਦੇ ਮੂੰਹ ਤੇ ਦਾੜੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਈ, 15 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਨੇ ਨਸ ਨੇ ਕਿਦਾਂ ਚੁੱਕ ਲਿਆ?" And when the police had over-egged the pudding, and they'd said 240 round ਚੱਲੇ ਆ, AK-47 ਬੜੀਆਂ ਰਿਕਵਰੀਆਂ ਜੀ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ, ਜੱਜ ਨੇ ਸਿੱਧਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ, ਵੀ ਮੂੰਹ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਦਾੜੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਈ, ਮੈਨੇ ਬੰਦੂਕਾਂ ਕਿਦਾਂ ਚਲਾਈਆਂ? ਦੂਸਰਾ ਸਵਾਲ, ਇਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਪਰਚਾ ਦਰਜ ਸੀਗਾ? Was he wanted in any case? Was he a militant? The CBI had proved that he wasn't, a 15-year-old boy. And the tragedy for us is that most of these boys were young teenagers or in their early 20s. So one thing that the thing that I guess coming here, we've spent 10 years in Punjab and Delhi, is there's an urgent need to take this discussion forward, and I'm really privileged that we're sharing a panel today with people that are taking the debate forward within the media, within these forums, and they're asking the right questions and they're pushing people to ask these, because the easiest thing for the state and people that are actually against giving real justice to people is that there's a bogey that gets raised in Punjab time and time again, that somehow if you discuss these issues of justice and giving these people some due, that it's going to Punjab ਦਾ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਵਿਗੜ ਜਾਊਗਾ। ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਇੰਨੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੰਨੇ ਕਮਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ। They're very sophisticated, the people of Punjab. They understand the different nuances of political parties and that sort of thing. And to say to them they're not capable of understanding a very important issue in a very rational way is the biggest tragedy. One thing that we have to do as a community, and our brothers and sisters here who support us in this fight for justice, is to say we're going to take the debate away from the politicians. So when we talk about genocide, when we talk about crimes against humanity, You can argue elections on any issue you want, absolutely, but this is an issue that's sacred to us. And if you're really genuine and sincere in bringing justice, then you have the ability to order inquiries and FIRs in every single one of these cases. Somebody said to me, if any government ever came into Punjab, they would be able to identify each and every one of these cases within 1 week. And they said in the second week they could file FIRs. Now maybe it's me that I'm naive, unoptimistic, but until we ask for these things to be done, they will never be done. When we first came to Punjab, the idea wasn't to look and see whether these cases could be prosecuted. It was to see, could this history be recorded? We had the Vadda Kallukara and the Shota Kallukara, and there was an old person in Amritsar who once said to us when we were doing this, and I never looked at it from this perspective. He said, Vadde Kallukara to Shote Kallukara tusi ek banda das diyo, kise shaheed da naam le lo. ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਹਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਲੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਹੋਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਮਾਰੇ ਗਏ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰੋਜ਼ ਦੀ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਜੇ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਜਾਇਜ਼ ਚੁੱਕ ਕੇ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਤਸ਼ੱਦਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ they said name me one and I didn't think of it from that perspective, but it's something that we thought that at the very least that the history of these people should be recorded. But having looked at this material, the evidence is compelling and it's there. The difference between the 84 cases was what happened in Delhi. You had police officers that were told not to record the names of the perpetrators. The difference in the cases in Punjab is every single person in that village will stand in any court today and say, "Sade samne is ghar de bande nu chukya." You ask the Sabka Sarpanch, you ask the Lambardar, you ask everybody within that village, and you will have at least 20 people that will say, when this boy was being dragged out blindfolded and thrown into the back of a police van, I was there. And that's all you actually need. So the plea really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring back these cases before the Supreme Court. There's 8,257 to say we're still knocking on the door of the Supreme Court because it's completely unacceptable that these people don't have any sort of remedy. So my plea is really to our comrades, our brothers and sisters, all the people from Delhi who stand on these issues, is to say it doesn't matter when it's happened or how it's happened or what's happened in the past. The important thing is we keep moving forward and we ask for justice to happen in these cases. And while these people are alive, it's our duty, it's our obligation to say that we stand with you and we will carry on knocking on the doors of the court, we'll carry on asking for these cases to be pushed. And then when we find ourselves in 100 years' time when everybody's died, then we'll say that we just simply want an apology like Jallianwala Bagh. Some people have compared 1984 to Jallianwala Bagh. It's completely wrong comparison. Jallianwala Bagh, everybody's died. The only thing that you can expect from the British government, they should apologise and they should give reparation. But the difference between Jallianwala Bagh and now is everybody's dead. You know, 100 saal purani gal hai. The difference between 84 and Jallianwala Bagh is that these people are still alive. Thank you.
I think at this stage a little perspective. We are, of course, gathered to mark the 35th anniversary of Operation Blue Star. What Satnam has said is there were consequences of Blue Star. So we had the genocide of November 84, but it didn't stop. I mean, the ruthless application of force in the Punjab wiped out a whole generation. First World War, a whole generation disappeared. I think between 1984 and 1992, I think roughly, a whole generation was traumatized in the Punjab. So this is why we have this young couple here to tell us. They left their homes in England and they've been here for 10 years. They came for 6 months and they're here 10 years. They have recorded over 8,000 names and they will tell you about it. I just wanted to bring something in perspective, and that is, as he said, we know who the perpetrators were. I'm not talking about communities or politics or something, but they are in our midst. They live next to us. They are in the Punjab. They are in Delhi. And if you know this, and I mean, the fact is that these were mass murders. And I remember once talking to the then governor of Punjab in Amritsar, there was some other context, and he said, do you know, we use 28 brigades of the Indian Army, and a lot of army and armed forces people here. 28 brigades? That's 3 divisions, 10 divisions, plus CRPF, plus, I mean, the Punjab countryside was ravaged by these security forces. And I mean, of course, I know a lot of people who escaped because they managed to not get caught, but thousands didn't escape. So this is the story. So 1984, Blue Star spawned what happened in the next 8 years. And we saw these killings, these murders, mass murders, and then of course, Punjab has remained traumatized. So the drugs. So this is what is the consequences. So we thought this year when we mark the 35th anniversary or 35th anniversary Blue Star, we talk about the consequences. So I now leave it to the young couple.
We have now just one photo take on. She'll show you some clipping as well as what has actually happened in making the documents.
So you saw in front of you families talking about what they had experienced, and I've actually stopped the film sort of 8 or 9 minutes in. The film goes further into who these families are and how we had an independent people's tribunal in Amritsar 2 years ago. And the history of independent people's tribunals in India are where people feel that the courts are they're not being heard in the courts. They have a sort of a forum where people can come and they can talk about these things. And we held one in Amritsar. When we held it, we didn't know how many families would come. And I can tell you, we had the hall was for 400 people, 600 families came. We had no room to even seat some of them. So some people are in the aisle, some people are in the back. Over a 2-day period, these families came and we gave everyone the opportunity to come in front of the panel. The panel, as you saw, there was Justice Ganguly, retired Supreme Court judge. There were lawyers and activists from across India. And these families came and they spoke about their experience, what had happened to them. And that's where the genesis for this documentary came about, because the atmosphere for those 2 days in that particular hall where you have all of these families coming, and for a lot of them, they'd never even experienced that feeling of being heard. So you're sitting and you're actually sharing. You're sharing with other victim families and you're sharing with an eminent panel. And like Satnam Singh was saying, you know, a lot of these people had been going to courts, trying to even be heard in a court, and these cases were being delayed for 20, 25 years. So that was the genesis of making this documentary. What my experience in Punjab, or what I take away, continue to take away from what happened in Punjab, is that, 35 years on, I was a toddler when 84 happened. And, you know, I don't have any direct experience with what happened in 84, but this issue is not going away. So until an issue has some resolution, it will not go away. So there will be people like Satnam and me, and then maybe in another 20 years when we are a little bit older, there'll be another younger generation, because the answers, until you find answers, there's no resolution. One of our most important aspects of the documentary was for far too long, the narrative in Punjab belonged to the perpetrators, the people who committed these crimes, and it didn't belong to the families. And for a long time, these families were meant to, they were kind of shunned by everyone. You know, no one, like Satnam Singh said, no one wanted to stand with them when these, awful things happened to them. And then even after that, there's no acknowledgement. And I would speak to mothers in Punjab who, even till today, when you have not seen a dead body of your son, you know, thoda jawan munda thode hi gharon police le gayi. You go everywhere to try and find them. You go to one police station, you try and get some people from the village with you, and you're told nahi assi, sometimes you're told, yeah, we've got him, we'll question him, we'll let him go, don't worry. Other times you said, which munda? Go on, who are you talking about? Yet you've seen that same person the day before in your house picking up your son. The psychological trauma, that denial, and that's what's happened in Punjab on a mass scale, is denial of these victims and denial that there is a victim. So when you deny people a basic human right or a basic human response, which is, this is my child, even the fact that they've been killed, no one is acknowledging. That denial, the long-term impact of that is huge. I don't think there's no psychological studies on this in Punjab, nothing has been, our work here is a very sort of top layer, if you like. We've gone into the villages, we're documenting cases, but the long-term impact of this, no one knows. We don't know. It's almost like a very scary laboratory in Punjab, and we don't know the long-term consequences of that. I just want to share two sort of personal experiences. I mentioned this also at the previous showing of the film. The need for documentation, why is it so important that these stories are recorded, this history is recorded, and these cases are taken forward, because they don't just remain in history. Like we talked about Jallianwala Bagh, or we talk about these other historical events. This is not a historical event. When you sit with a mother in her 50s, or you sit with a wife of someone who's, not that much older than, probably a lot younger than some of the people in this room. It's not an issue of history. Let me just finish. Never forget 84 seems to be a big theme, and rightly so, when we talk about the pogroms across India and we talk about the attack on Darbar Sahib. The families in Punjab don't even have an opportunity to be forgotten because they haven't really been remembered. How can you remember something that you have not understood? How can you remember something that has not been documented? So the struggle, I guess, for the families in Punjab remains one of recognition as victims, and would want to be in a position that we find the 84 issue in Delhi and the 84 issue as far as the attack on Darbar Sahib. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we proceed further, I'll request Siddharth Lochan Singh to say a few words, and then we'll take the next panelist.
माफ़ करियो, मैं बड़ा ज़रूरी पॉइंट ਲਈ खड़ा होया। पहली गल कि जिस नैशनल ह्यूमन राइट कमीशन ने एक डिसीजन लिया सी, मैं ਉਹਦਾ मैंबर ਸੀ। वेरी वेल डन बाय बोथ कपल। 2003 तो 2006 आई वाज मैंबर ऑफ द नैशनल ह्यूमन राइट कमीशन। इट वाज हेडेड बाय चीफ जस्टिस आनंद। उत्थे एक रूल है ह्यूमन राइट कमीशन का कि ਜਿਹੜਾ ह्यूमन राइट कमीशन की फॉर्मेशन तो पहला कोई केस होवे, दे कैन नॉट टेक इट। ह्यूमन राइट कमीशन बनया 1994 सो ये 84 के केसेस वो लैन नूं तैयार नहीं सी। प्रोसीडिंग उहदियां बड़ियां पढ़ लेना, बड़ी हिम्मत नाल जोर नाल ये डिसीजन हो गया कि खालड़ा केस की इंक्वायरी कराई जाए। बट जो इन्होंने कहा बिल्कुल ठीक है, इंक्वायरी वाज ओनली टू फाइंड द नेम्स ऑफ द पर्सन। देयर वाज नो ऑर्डर दैट द पुलिस रोल शुड आल्सो बी इन्वेस्टिगेटेड। सो दैट पोर्शन फर्स्ट was done by the police. It took 3 years. They then selected the names and compensation was given. That was the role of human rights. लेकिन second जी more important गल है जिहड़े असीं सारे चुप बैठे कि after all these disappearances happened in Punjab, every encounter is recorded in the police station. सारे पुलिस अफसर बैठे हो, that is the law. Every encounter is recorded in that particular police station. So जितने encounter होए in the record available। 15 साल अकाली गवर्नमेंट रही, उस तो बाद बादल साहब 3 बारी मुख्यमंत्री बने। आई स्पोक इन पार्लियामेंट, मेरी स्पीच हुई, पढ़ लो, सारे को लोग सुनते हो। आई रेज दिस इशू इन द पार्लियामेंट कि ये इनकाउंटर की लिस्ट बना दो ईवन टूडे। 15 साल अकाली सरकारें दे सब्जैक्ट टच नहीं किया। सुमेध सैनी जिन्हें सब तो बाद एलैज्ड इनकाउंटर किए, वो पुलिस का डीजी सी। एक मुसलमान सी आलम जिसके जुम्मे सी कि उसने 2000 बंदे मारे, वो भी डीजी। सो दोज वेरी पुलिस अफसर जिन्होंने जुम्मे इनकाउंटर सी, दे वर रूलिंग एट दैट टाइम इन द पुलिस। सो वी फेल्ड। ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੋ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਬੜਾ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ। ਇਸ਼ੂ ਤੇ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ 84 ਦੇ ਹੋਰ 100 ਇਸ਼ੂ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ। ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਦ ਰੀਅਲ ਇਸ਼ੂ। ਤਾਂ ਕਮ ਆਊਟ ਵਿਦ ਦੀ ਲਿਸਟ ਆਫ ਐਨਕਾਊਂਟਰ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਲੋਕ ਮਰੇ, ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਡਾਕੂਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ। ਉਹ ਡਾਕੂਮੈਂਟ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਕੋਲ ਹੈ ਈਵਨ ਟੂਡੇ। ਜੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਿਟਾਇਰਡ ਅਫਸਰ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਲੈਟ ਅਸ ਮੇਕ ਇਟ ਐਫਰਟ ਐਟ ਲਿਸਟ ਬਣਾਓ। ਇੱਕ ਇਨਕਾਊਂਟਰ ਹੋਇਆ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ ਵਿੱਚ, ਓਨਲੀ ਵਨ, ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਸੁਪਰੀਮ ਕੋਰਟ ਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਸਾਲ ਹਾਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ। ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦਾ ਡੀਜੀ DIG ਸਾਰੇ ਅਰੈਸਟ ਹੋਏ, ਇੱਕ ਕੇਸ, ਇੱਕ ਓਨਲੀ ਵਨ ਕੇਸ। ਆਈ ਰੇਜ਼ ਦਿਸ ਇਨ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ। ਔਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਹਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਕੇਸ, ਨੋਬਡੀ ਬਾਦਰ। ਸੋ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਸਾਡੀ ਫਾਲਟ ਆਪਣਾ ਹੋਮ ਵੀ ਬਲੇਮ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਕੁਰਬਾਨੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸਰਕਾਰ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਡੋ ਛੱਡੋ ਜੀ, ਇਹ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਜੀ, ਇਹ ਐਵੇਂ ਹੋਰ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਗੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਵੀ ਅਫਸਰ ਫੇਲ ਐਂਡ ਵੀ ਡੋਂਟ ਵਾਂਟ ਟੂ ਸੇ ਸੋ। ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਲਿਹਾਜ਼ ਪਾਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਆਪਣੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਪੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਸਾਡੀ, ਵੀ ਨੈਵਰ ਸੇ। ਹੁਣ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੂਜੀ ਕਾ ਜੀ ਉਹ ਦੂਜੀ ਹੈ, ਜੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ। ਸੋ ਦੋ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਮਿਸਿੰਗ ਹਨ, ਮਾਫ ਕਰਿਓ। ਇੱਕ ਐਨਕਾਊਂਟਰ, ਇੱਕ ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਟਿਲ ਟੂਡੇ ਕਿ 84 ਦੇ ਇਸ ਡਿਕੇਡ ਟੋਟਲ ਡੈਥ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਹੈ। ਇਟ ਇਜ਼ ਸੋ ਈਜ਼ੀ, ਹਰ ਪਿੰਡ 'ਚੋਂ ਲਿਸਟ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਦੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਮਰੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ। ਉਹ SGPC ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ। ਦੇਖੋ ਦਿਸ ਡੈਡ ਕਿਤਨੇ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ 'ਚ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ 40,000 ਮਰੇ, ਪਰ ਲਿਸਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਨਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ। ਐਂਡ ਇਟ ਸੋ ਈਜ਼ੀ। ਇਹ ਹੁਣ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਸੈਂਸਸ ਕਰਾਓ ਪਿੰਡ ਵਾਈਜ਼, ਹਰ ਪਿੰਡ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਦਾ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਮਰਿਆ। ਸੋ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਮਾਈ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ, ਸਾਰੀ ਫॉर ਇੰਟਰਵੈਂਸ਼ਨ।
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸਰ, ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਵੀ ਆਰ ਟੇਕਿੰਗ ਨੋਟਿਸ ਆਫ ਇਟ, ਔਰ ਇੱਕ ਰੈਜ਼ੋਲੂਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ SGPC ਨੂੰ ਰਿਕੁਐਸਟ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਾਰੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਿੰਡ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਟਿਵ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਤੱਕ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਘਰ ਤੋਂ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਆਦਮੀ ਮਿਸਿੰਗ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਦਿਸ ਵਿਲ ਕਮ ਲਿਟਲ ਲੇਟਰ। ਨਾਓ ਆਈ ਰਿਕੁਐਸਟ ਦ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟ Harmandar Kaur. She will give us the gist of the starting of this drug menace in Punjab, and followed by her toast subsequently. Thank you.
पंजाब की ड्रग प्रॉब्लम समझण ਲਈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਿ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ। ਹੈਰੋਇਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੀ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ जो डेवलपमेंट्स अफगानिस्तान पाकिस्तान ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਔਰ ਜੋ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਪੋਸਟ ਆਪਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਲੂ ਸਟਾਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਉਹਦਾ ਲਿੰਕ ਹੈਗਾ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਇਟਸ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਬਜੈਕਟ ਚੁਣਿਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਡਿਸਅਪੀਅਰੈਂਸ। ਥੀਸ ਵਰ two major developments that happened after post-Operation Blue Star. One were disappearances and the other was drugs problem. In Afghanistan, Pakistan ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਸਟ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈ and it was not able to stabilize, the Soviet army marched in 1979. Any civil war saying that government lost complete control of the countryside, rural economy bilkul khatam ho gayi, and this meant growing urban populations were dependent on the government assistance. Imports of arms and cash, which led to rapid monetization of the economy. 1980 ਦੇ ਦਹਾਕੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਰੰਟ ਲਾਈਨ ਸਟੇਟ ਸੀਗੀ to fight America's proxy war against the Soviet Union, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੁਜਾਹਿਦੀਨਸ ਨੂੰ encourage ਕੀਤਾ to grow poppy cultivation in the entire area. And in the next few years, acreage under poppy cultivation increased by leaps and bounds. People took to opium production because economically viable ਸੀਗਾ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਰੋਜ਼ੀ ਰੋਟੀ ਦਾ ਜ਼ਰੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ। And CIA was supporting the covert operations in this region. So America totally overlooked what was going on in Afghanistan. The trend became absolutely clear by 80s. ਜਿਹੜੇ internal factors were leading to upswing in Afghan opium production, external factors were opening major markets, ensuring the economic viability of this production. 10 साल ਦੇ अंदर opium was included in the livelihood strategies of individual farmers. That means बहुते farmers ने उनके opium grow करनी शुरू कर दी because it was very easy to sell, it was a lucrative product and people could make easy money. Over a period of time, either एक structured and formalized economic system बन गया ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ nascent drugs for arms trade पैदा हुआ. And we know Dara, Adam Khel and all these people became weapons markets. Mujahideen अपनी opium बेचते सी, drugs खरीदते सी, and that is how they were able to sustain the proxy war. Besides shrinking sources of illicit opium, now 79 also the Iranian revolution happened. And because of Islamization of Iran, उन्होंने total poppy cultivation बंद कर दी थी. So Afghan illicit opium in Afghan got a further boost and it got a new market. Now all this could have been curbed because US normally drugs they होते कड़ी नजर रखता है. But it was sorting their covert operations because it was meeting with the cost of their proxy war against the Soviet Union. The CIA's aid to Afghan Mujahideen in the 80s expanded opium production in Afghanistan and linked Pakistan's heroin labs to the world market. Helmand Valley and Kandahar provinces on the border with Pakistan emerged as the largest producers of coffee. From Afghanistan, cultivation spread to northwest frontier province and Balochistan. Today, Afghanistan grows poppy, I mean you'd be shocked to know, in almost 3 lakh hectares of land. And Pakistan in over 6,000 hectares. In NWFP, Balochistan and FATA, which is federally administered tribal areas. Now the Mujahideen who were growing opium in Afghanistan, they brought it across the border to Pakistani heroin refiners who operated under protection of, it is a known fact by now, General Fazl-e-Haq, who was then governor of Northwest Frontier Province. By 1988, there were estimated 100 to 200 heroin refineries in the province's Khyber district. Trucks from the Army's National Logistics Cell arriving with CIA arms from Karachi often returned loaded with heroin. Now we all know that jadoo Afghanistan the war chal rahi sigi, so there was something called the Afghan pipeline, jide which CIA was sending large amounts of weapons. Now ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ weapons ਉਹ Karachi ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, same trucks heroin ਭਰ ਕੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ. And these vehicles were protected from search by ISI's papers. In other words, as this Afghanistan heroin started growing, the ISI and the Pakistani army started having a well-entrenched interest in it because it was the front line of running the United States proxy war. Militarization of drugs gave birth to a phenomenon called heroinization of society. Pakistan which any rapidly spread the usage of heroin because the state was involved in marketing it. That in 1980s its market share was only 3%. In the next 4 years, it became 31%. Now, Pakistan has a 2,250 kilometer border with Afghanistan, and it is the primary country for transit of drugs from Afghanistan. The heroin